Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Sunday Club. As you can see, Ambassador Dogra is with us today, so we will be very well behaved and start off this conversation on the right note and with by asking the right questions. And of course, Professor is joining us as well. So, Ambassador, right down straight to you. Prime Minister going to Ukraine is very significant, is it not?
I agree with you, Advaita, especially in the background of what has been happening between Ukraine and Russia, and where the bombs and missiles and means of destruction seem to be increasing rather than decreasing. And what is worse is this big divide between those who are encouraging and arming Ukraine and the global south. That is a very significant development because the global south does not want war. And Prime Minister Modi's visit was must be seen in two contexts. First, he went to Russia after having told Mr. Putin in Tashkent in an international meeting that this is not the era of war. This is not the age of war. I do not recall any leader of a major country telling the leader of another major warring country that this is not the age of war. So that by itself was a very bold step. Then he repeated the same message when he went to Moscow. And I must say, to the credit of Mr. Putin, that he received it well, he received it in a balanced fashion, and in fact, he sent out signals saying that he would be ready to consider a dialogue towards peace if it is, framed in a proper fashion. But he was not invited to the peace conference, which was engineered by the West and instigated to some extent by Ukraine in terms of who were going to be the invitees to that conference. And Russia was kept out. So Mr. Modi's visit to Ukraine was a follow-up on the initiative and on the message that he had conveyed already to Mr. Putin. And when he went to Ukraine, he did exactly the same thing. He said that, this is the time to start thinking of a dialogue. And if Ukraine and Russia sit across the table and start that dialogue, and if any support is needed from India towards that objective, then India would be ready to help if necessary. So that in sum is the objective and the message of Mr. Modi's visit. How Zelensky reacts to it is a different thing. But so far, positive signals are not coming from Zelensky's side.
Okay. Sandeep, Prime Minister took a train that was 20 hours long, the journey that he made to go visit Zelensky. I think there's something very significant about that as well. The effort that it took to get there, being a war-torn country, keeping his word, so to speak, and the fairness of his position and India's position. What do you make of this on the global scale?
I personally, as I'm not a foreign policy expert, neither political science academic like Dipankar is, so I can only give you a layman's view as an ordinary Indian. I have been rather intrigued or mystified by this visit. At a very superficially, to me, it appears it was a balancing act because Mr. Modi had received quite a bit of flack for his meeting with Putin, going there in the midst of everything, and there has been, a lot of, the ante has been raised, heat has been raised here, and Americans and others have been making no secret about their displeasure about that meeting, all of it, and whatever has happened in Bangladesh thereafter. So I think this was to some extent a little bit of a balancing act. And what has, I think to some extent, I can be relating to BJP. I think BJP has been a bit naive in these issues, both vis-a-vis Pakistan. If you see earlier, Mr. Vajpayee's outreach to Pakistan first, Mr. Vajpayee also went across in the same manner, and then invited Musharraf to Agra, something Amitabh was referred to, and how Musharraf actually betrayed him by having that press conference behind his back soon after that whole meeting took place. Mr. Modi himself had taken that famous stopover on the way back from Afghanistan to meet Nawaz Sharif, and it did not yield any results. And on this time, we know even before the talk ended, while there was a lot of body language, positive body language from Mr. Modi, hugging Zelensky and putting his arms around him, talking, etc. To see, again from a purely spectator's point of view, the kind of facial expressions of Zelensky during those meetings or photo ops or anywhere, where unlike Putin, despite the language barrier or whatever, reciprocal warmth, and it could have been just for the camera, but he was doing that. Zelensky was not even attempting to do that. So all that, left me a bit wondering that why Mr. Modi had to go out of his way at this juncture we've been making all the right noises at the UN, elsewhere, that we are not pro-war and we are, pro-peace and the rest of it. So what was particularly served by going here, and what impact it will make at this juncture globally? I have serious reservations on that. I don't think,
Okay.
certainly even in our country, quite expectedly, you see very, very critical remarks from people not only in the opposition, but some of Mr. Modi's own supporters, Mr. Dogra's ex-colleagues in the Foreign Service. Some of them have also come out critically. So personally, I am, as I said, mystified by this visit.
Okay. Professor, yes, I'm just coming to you. Professor,
Okay.
I want to ask you, do you think this balancing act, interpretation of this visit is a bit cynical?
No,
Or do you think
it's not a balancing act. No, let me start with two propositions. Both are consistent, actually. They're not inconsistent with one another. First is that the Russians have made their security misapprehensions quite clear with the eastward expansion of NATO. And in spite of agreements, Minsk Accord 2, etc., the West has consistently violated them. You see, and Russia has pushed back. For example, the first pushback would have been what it did in Georgia. The second pushback, in a sense, what it did in Crimea. And this is, of course, a third pushback. So India has not stated this explicitly, but the fact is the eastward expansion of NATO has created problems. The West has gone back on its own words that they would not do so, number one. Number two, there is also no doubt that Russia has also severely miscalculated when they started this particular war. Now, we have also stated this not so many terms, but Prime Minister Modi has told Vladimir Putin that this is not the age of war. Now, we have kept our relationships with the Russians intact. Now, it is not a balancing act. What are you saying? That we are not for war, we are for peace. And if, therefore, we have good relations with Russia, we will try our best also to maintain good relations with Ukraine, because there must be somebody which is able and willing to talk to both parties. Because in the West, nobody is basically doing this. In fact, you could argue they're trying their best to ensure that Zelensky keeps up this adversarial attitude vis-a-vis Russia. In fact, I think only if Donald Trump wins the presidency will we see a change from Zelensky's side. And I think then a peace, if it does occur, and it is likely to occur, will be on terms which Russia has been asking for a long period of time, and which also Trump agrees, namely that there should not be a eastward push of NATO, and that Ukraine should be a neutral country. Now, as to whether Russia's actions on Crimea, East Ukraine are rolled back, that's another matter altogether. Those will be sticky points. But the fact is There is no talking point at this point in time between Ukraine and Russia. Not only that, there is no common country who can talk to each other. India at this point in time is one of the few countries that can talk to both. And that is why I don't call this a balancing act. I call this a bridging act. And it has been absolutely consistent with our foreign policy statements and with the foreign policy positions that we have held. So to call it a balancing act, I think, is cynical. You see, the problem is the following. We went to Ukraine, and everybody thought that, if anybody thought that Zelensky would not be critical of our trade relations with Russia, I think he was living in a fool's paradise. He is a desperate person fighting a war where his position is actually weak. For him to say such a thing is only natural. But we have this retinue of experts saying, look, you went there and this is what Zelensky said, and they're comparing it to Musharraf's statements post Agra. These two comparisons parallel, there are no parallels between the two. You see, there we were a direct stakeholder in Agra. Here we are not a direct stakeholder, although we want peace out there, because this particular war did throw our economy into kilter as well. You see, the rise in the prices of food, especially wheat, also affected us. So in that sense, we are affected, but we are not a direct stakeholder in this particular conflict. And what we've done, we've demonstrated we are the only country that can talk to both sides with some amount of credibility. I don't think there is any other country which can actually do that.
I'll just butt in for a second, I'll just for a second,
point, Sandeep.
Quick. Yeah, being the contrarian, and in the absence of Suhail, I would use the term Suhail's favorite expression, "Begani shadi mein," kind of a thing. It will appear because the Ukraine and Russia is to some extent different from Israel and Palestine. And in this case, Zelensky, it suits him to be in war. And it is not just Zelensky. Zelensky is just a prop of the Western NATO powers. So you are essentially trying to talk to them. Who are you really talking? Zelensky is just a puppet, to my mind. Go ahead.
Yeah. I still do think that going into a war-torn country, taking a 20-hour journey shows a level of commitment, which is frankly unprecedented. I've not seen any other global leader do that. They've jetted in or jetted out or not gone at all. And Prime Minister certainly knew that Zelensky would say the things he said, because he made a public statement even when Prime Minister went to Russia. So he expressed his displeasure on a global scale and very openly. So I think part of diplomacy is also being able to listen to the things that you don't really want to hear, or that are shot your way for no fault of yours, really, apart from just maintaining a sensible stance, which is that there should be no war. Pallavi is back from Dhaka, so it's good to have her back safe and sound. Pallavi, India has found itself in, we're going to discuss your Bangladesh visit as well. But before that, I just find this interesting that we find ourselves in the global headlines, geopolitical global headlines, let me put it that way, with Sheikh Hasina's rapid sort of fleeing from Bangladesh and landing in New Delhi, and then Prime Minister's visit to Ukraine. Both happening together, global events, political events, war events, in a very short span of time, with India playing a significant role or having a significant presence, as the case may be.
Yeah, I mean, even I'm not too much of an expert on foreign policy and diplomacy, but as citizens, we do see what was happening, and I just found it very interesting. The Prime Minister in Ukraine. Look, I mean, Zelensky's comments, and this much I can tell you, it's not that the government is shocked by it. I mean, they have a very good team. I mean, there was Ajit Doval, S. Jaishankar. They're all seasoned diplomats. And I'm sure they were aware of what is going to be the kind of stance which is being taken by Zelensky. After all, his country is at war, and, he has his own grudges against Russia. But I think that's the point which India wanted to make by the Prime Minister's visit. I remember when India bought a lot of oil from Russia, there was a lot of criticism. How can you do so? Russia is evil. You should give up on that oil. And I remember Mr. Jaishankar had called the bluff of many of the countries in West Europe by saying, listen, you take more oil in a day from Russia and countries at war than we took in the last couple of days. I mean, I think there was some word he used. So he says this is the hypocrisy of the West, which needs to be called out. I mean, at the end of the day, India has to look after the interests of its own people. Russian oil was cheaper, and therefore we went in for oil from Russia. So when he went to Ukraine, I'm sure the Prime Minister and his team knew that this is one point which Zelensky would like to raise, that you have to cripple Russia economically. So why are you taking oil from Russia? And we don't know those backroom or backdoor, what could have been the defense which came in from the Indian side to Zelensky. But I guess it's pretty much the point which he proved by his presence there, his good equations with Putin and personal ones. I mean, from one side, you're seeing pictures of the Prime Minister hugging Zelensky and they're holding hands and walking along. Equally, earlier, there were pictures of the PM with, Putin as well. So this is what non-alignment or a balanced diplomatic policy is all about. I mean, we can be friends, we can coexist. That is as far as Russia is concerned and Ukraine is concerned. And this much I can tell you, that I don't think this government is very perturbed or upset by the comments of Zelensky. I think they knew it was coming. I mean, after all, Zelensky also has to address his constituency, his people back home. So he was making those kind of right noises for his people. Well, India did what we had to do. I don't think there's anything wrong if the Prime Minister went there, frankly speaking.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't think there's a problem with that either. And now we can quickly, just to bring in your Dhaka experience, Pallavi, how was it? And then we can go to the ambassador and get a perspective on it.
Well, I mean, one of those rare moments, no, not rare, one of those moments I'm so happy I'm a Bengali, because there's really a huge language problem. And of course, they are upset. And it's a nation which, when I went there, everything seemed normal. Shops are open, the cafeterias are buzzing. On my flight to Dhaka, there were lots of foreigners, so those business houses were opening up and everything seemed normal. But I could get a sense that things are not really normal. And I really wonder, a couple of quick things, I wonder really whether that country is ever going to be politically stable, because unprecedented student protests toppled one government. And I think many of those student organizations have smelled blood. And I did speak to a couple of students. Some of them said, we should go back to studies. We did what we could do and we did. But there were many other students who felt that we should still be out on the streets. And we should keep on being like the conscience keeper of any government which comes to power, which doesn't sound really great, because tomorrow any government comes to power post-elections, whenever those elections are held, you never know. There will be a group of student organization who will go out and say, oh, we don't like this about this government. So back to the streets. They are very emotional. They are high-strung. And now there's so much of division among the student groups as well. There were one or two initially during the protest, but now there are multiple of them. And I'm just not talking about Dhaka. You have to go into interiors of Bangladesh, in Khulna, in Chittagong, and all those areas. They are more rabid. And there is always a fear factor that the Jamaats may take over. And they have. I mean, I personally met one or two people who are perceived to be close to Sheikh Hasina. I mean, like today, I think one of the tourism ministers or someone was forced to resign because he was in the Sheikh Hasina government. That's what is happening. It's not so much an attack on Hindus because they're Hindus. It's also because they're seen to be close to Awami League or patronized by Sheikh Hasina. And which is why I'm really worried about the instability. So the students are very divided. Some of them are very rabid. The Jamaat is very out and about. And and the BNP is very clearly anti-India. I mean, I remember when I was boarding a flight back to India, at that gate, there was this guard who was checking my boarding card. And he said, Didi, we have floods in our country. I said, I know, it's terrible. I do take care. He said, it is all because of you people. So there is this whole WhatsApp kind of a narrative which is being spread that India is to blame. Whereas the MEA has come out with a specific statement that it's got nothing to do that. So they want to revisit the Teesta thing. On everything, India is going to be blamed, because that's how BNP plus Jamaat is going to try and survive and flourish.
But wasn't that the plan? I'm not sure that it's only. I think there's definitely targeting of Hindus. I don't think we should in any way kind of link it to
No, there is targeting.
No, but I mean, when you say Sheikh Hasina because they are support Awami League, I don't think it's that. I mean, that may be something that justifies it even further.
No. There is this feeling
but I think there's
that Hindus were patronized by Sheikh Hasina. Hindus were patronized by Sheikh Hasina. So the attacks are being fought on two grounds. One, we are against Hindus. And second, we are even more against Hindus because they were patronized by Sheikh Hasina. So they are the bad people. And I'm telling you, I mean, I saw temples. I went to Dhaka College. I did that story. There is a Saraswati Mandir, inside that Hindu college, in the Dhaka College. There are rows and rows of hostels abandoned. I mean, the food, clothes, everything. The Hindu students just ran. The Saraswati Mandir has been broken down. I mean, Dhakeshwari Mandir I went, which was fine. But, if you go into interiors of Bangladesh, there is this systematic attack on an organized attack on the Hindus and on the temples. There's no denying that fact. I'm not suggesting that this is not happening. What I'm saying is a double whammy now.
Okay,
It's not
clarified.
just
Thank you.
not just Pallavi about the attacks. I was told in the interiors, and Professor can correct, where wherever there were Hindu principals or teachers in some of the schools and colleges, they're getting replaced overnight. So that is where it's a
Not only
bigger
interior,
issue.
Sandeep, in Dhaka itself.
They're
In
being
fact,
forced to
when I
resign.
went to the press club of Dhaka, so there was this huge crowd of 100, 150 people. They're saying we need to change the education system. And you know what they meant by that? Purane teachers ke pathao, chorao there. They're all Sheikh Hasina. They're all Hindus. We don't want them. So they go and throw ink on the, the head and water and what not. So that's what they're doing. I could speak Bangla, so I could sense. But those who can't speak Bangla and who are coming from India, I mean,
Yeah, I guess you could,
for example.
One thing.
Yeah, you could understand some of the things they were saying to each other. Yeah, there was. Professor, I'm just going to go to the ambassador. Please wait.
Sure.
I'm just going to go to the ambassador. Ambassador, please. You've seen that whole that war that took place, the creation of the new state of Bangladesh, the role India played, and the kind of animosity now that there is towards India, especially from the army as well, from whatever I've heard. So, would you have thought back in the days that this is what it would come to in terms of a relationship between the two countries? And is history really that short?
Well, history is very short, and history has a way of repeating itself. I think we are back to BNP times when Khaleda Zia was the Prime Minister, and the relations between India and Bangladesh were far from friendly. In fact, there was firing almost frequently, I would say, on the border between Bangladesh and India. But that apart, the larger question, and I think Pallavi would be in the right position to address that question, is that A, was it spontaneous, or B, was it very well planned? The other question is that Bangladesh did exactly what Pakistan has done repeatedly. The prime ministers there have superseded army officers to appoint a general of their liking or their choosing. And that particular general has engineered the coup. Musharraf being one example. Here, Sheikh Hasina had chosen a person who was her relative. And she chose to appoint him after superseding a couple of people who were senior to this man. And within 1.5 months, he turned exactly against Sheikh Hasina's expectations. And, one moment protests were going on. There was a fear that they would come and raid the Prime Minister's residence. The moment she leaves, things start cooling down, calming down, except for chasing down the Awami League workers or destroying the property and lives of Hindus. So, what is the message? Is it all internal, or were there some external forces involved? I would only be speculating if I say that there's a big Pakistani hand. Perhaps there are some other countries also involved. But the other question...
Ambassador Dogra, just to quickly ask you here, you've of course served in Pakistan as well at our High Commission there. Do you think the Pakistanis had it in them to engineer something like this, because they've got so much going on in their own country? I don't think that they're really in a position to
I'm glad
effect
you asked
regime
the question.
change.
I'm glad
Yes.
you asked this question because Afghans were also wondering all these years, for the last 30 years, that Pakistan has so much going on in their country. Why are they bothering us? So it is a very well planned operation, because why would students of Bangladesh, leave aside their political affiliations and so on, why would they target everything which was holy for Bangladesh? Sheikh Mujibur Rahman was the one who created Bangladesh, who liberated Bangladesh, and yet his house was targeted. I have seen the blood stains in the walls where Sheikh Mujib and his family were shot down. They have ensured that the blood stains are removed so that it doesn't remain a memorial. His statues were knocked down, and as Pallavi described, the Awami League members are being targeted one by one, and Hindus are being targeted, which is a favorite clay pigeon shooting game for Pakistanis. So we have, I mean, for example, if you were to say that it is only American hand, Americans wouldn't go after Sheikh Mujibur Rahman despite USS Enterprise. They do not have grudge against a particular leader of Bangladesh. If Americans were involved, they have certain strategic interests, but they won't go to these lengths. But the larger question is, why do leaders repeatedly get deceived? Sheikh Hasina was deceived, she fell for a trap, and she's paying the price. But that is only one example. In fact, there are larger issues involved on Israel and Ukraine front.
Ambassador, a quick question here. I have a friend who's a very prominent journalist in Dhaka, and we have conversations, and he tells me that India has to stop thinking that just because Sheikh Hasina is good for your country, or she has friendly relationships with your country, doesn't mean she's good for Bangladesh, or that she's popular or liked. Doesn't mean that she's popular or liked in Bangladesh and she's not like an autocrat. That reminds me, you have a new book coming out called The Autocrats. So that's just a quick.
It has already come out, Autocrats. And in fact, I'm surprised that it should have come out just when things went wrong in Bangladesh. It has come out at a time when there is an autocrat in Israel who's taking his country and the region down a hellish path. There's an autocrat in Ukraine who, because of his ego and because of his self-interest, is not willing to listen to any voice of reason that there has to be a stop to mass murders of Ukrainian Russians as well. The war can stop. It's not such a big issue that things cannot be sorted out. So autocrats is really about what is happening in the world today and what has happened in the world from the time it started forming societies. But coming back to the advice by your friend in Bangladesh, he's absolutely right. Our country, that means India, must have its hand out to every political opinion in Bangladesh. I mean, you can't sort of have a dialogue with every Bangladeshi citizen, but you must have a dialogue with every major political party so that you have a sense of what is happening. And you had also referred to why was this not anticipated by Sheikh Hasina or, let's say, even India. In fact, the signals were there, the signs were there for the last 2 years. Any number of international magazines were saying that she is down the autocratic path, which is not going to last long. So it is not as if the world was taken by surprise. Hasina was taken by surprise, and we made the mistake of putting our eggs only in Hasina's basket.
Yeah.
In fact, the BNP second in command,
Right.
Fakhrul Alam,
So you wanted
told me. So he just one word in an interview, he told me that we have time and again told the Indian diplomats, don't put all your eggs in one basket. You won't have a good equation with Sheikh Hasina, but we are also in the opposition. You also need to have a good equation in opposition. So he says, and now they are becoming very anti-India. I mean, his comments are going on and on. For example, on Teesta, on floods, they want Sheikh Hasina to be brought back. The extradition of Sheikh Hasina. Those are the demands which are going to come in from the BNP, and they already have begun actually.
Professor, I want to ask you a very quick question. Professor, I want to ask you a question. There's someone from your ilk who is now, I guess, in charge for the interim, Mohammed Yunus.
Hmm. Yeah. Okay. So her connection has gone kaput again. This happens. Ambassador, this happens during our
Don't
show.
mean again, yeah. Don't be mean, yeah.
Our
And
host,
you're the last one who
unfortunately,
should be saying that, Professor.
our,
You're the last
our
one who
host
should be saying
sometimes has a tendency to basically be paralyzed because her connections, internet connection is not a particularly stable one. But before I answer her question, I'll have a couple of things out here. I think there are two propositions. One is that Hasina ultimately went down the autocracy route and she created conditions whereby students rose, her position became shaky. The other proposition is people were waiting for this kind of opportunity so that they could do their own bit. And both propositions are consistent with one another, and therefore she had to basically, actually lose power and she had to go away. And then very smoothly an interim government comes in. Everybody seems to have the same name in mind, both Bangladeshi students as well as certain Indian economists from Ithaca, Oxford, etc. Everybody says Muhammad Yunus, and hey presto, you have a new Bangladeshi government. That's one. The other thing is, with respect to, I think, having your own links with other Bangladeshi parties. With BNP, I think it's difficult. I mean, I remember BNP when it came back in power 2001 to 2006. That was, I think, the worst time for Hindus. Of course, it's never gotten better. Never gotten better. It's become worse till then. That was the time when they started attacking Hindus, and therefore you could have contacts with the BNP. As to whether we would have some leverage or not, that's another matter altogether. Number one. Number two, you have to deal with whoever comes to power. Sheikh Hasina's coming to power in 2008 was not our doing. It was the army stepping in, and after 2 years they called elections and Sheikh Hasina came in, and that's what we've dealt with. In fact, I know we were trying to get Sheikh Hasina to democratize her setup even more, to give the opposition some space. But when these things go south, they go really, really south. One thing I'll talk about Pallavi Ghosh is, WhatsApp forwards, etc. It's not as innocent as that. The misinformation that is going on in Bangladesh has also very reputed players. So, for example, when water came down to Tripura and parts of Bangladesh were flooded, you had professors in the United Kingdom, Bangladeshi professors in Yale, accusing India of releasing that particular water. It was only when Bangladeshi experts, geologists, geographers, who basically said, look, this is a result of rainfall. The dam did not open. It's basically spillway water coming in, and the water from Tripura, by the way, does not go to the town which was submerged. It goes to some other district. It goes to Kumila. So once the Bangladeshi experts made it clear, it's died somewhat. But cussedly, these professors in Yale and Oxford kept on peddling this particular line. The Bangladeshi government did not accuse India of releasing the water prematurely. And yet you have professors pushing this particular line. So it's not WhatsApp forwards. It's a well-structured, even if amorphous, not two distinct contradictory propositions. You have a retinue of Bangladeshi intellectuals very well placed abroad who are peddling these lies vis-a-vis India, and it's taken up in Bangladesh. So what we have is a very well-organized setup which keeps on peddling these particular lies. And this is
I want to go to Sandeep now. Yeah, thanks, Professor. Sandeep, very quick question for you is, is it, there's a lot of conversation going on that there's a Western hand, and the aim is to destabilize the neighborhood for India and to create a sort of uncertain and insecure position, wherein then we start leaning a little more their way and don't maintain this non-aligned stance. How much import do you put to that analysis?
See, mine would be conjecture. I think that is a policy matter which Ambassador Dogra can say. I just wanted to make before that two quick comments. It is not that, India's relationship with the Army League has always been rosy and hunky-dory, even from the time of Mujib. Ambassador Dogra would say that even in those times, there have been, blow hot, blow cold. There have been suspicions on India. Mujib has actually, at that time, some extent turned hostile or otherwise. So this has been going on. But as far as BNP is concerned, BNP is totally a no-no as far as India is concerned. What India can be blamed is they never tried to even cultivate alternative leadership, moderate leadership, or build a relationship with them. The option was not binary between Army League and BNP, because BNP in their earlier regime had not only had an anti-India stand from Bangladesh, but they were held responsible for a lot of insurgency things which were happening in Assam and other places. They were harboring, so they are, certainly not India's friends. And to get into Pallavi's suggestion of building bridges or anything with them could have been very, very risky, unless there was an alternative leadership coming up there. Now, the point which you're saying, Advaita, is always true, and I have written about it. If you see to some extent how the things had panned out, it's a very, very, somebody can say it's a figment of my imagination, how the things had panned out in 75, leading up to Mujib's elimination. And at that point in time, how the tension was ratcheted up in India. At that point, what we in hindsight today, People's Movement, it was very much enactment of a similar thing as what Bangladesh saw just now. And some would argue that Indira Gandhi's hands were also forced at that point in time to declare emergency, because otherwise the same kind of pressure was building up here. And at that time, as far as Mujib's elimination is concerned, it was never in doubt who were behind it. I know someone, I wouldn't name, whose father was the person in charge over in Bangladesh. He was a station manager of Office of RAW, who was eliminated a year before Mujib's assassination, because they were trying to remove all impediments in the way, because he was one of the persons who was overseeing the relationship. He had done it for Sikkim, and he was doing it for Bangladesh as well. So that was very clear who were doing it. And I think while Pakistan may have been the instrument to do this, Pakistan wouldn't have been able to do it alone without support from other bigger players. And in this sort of a situation, somebody would say people suspect Chinese hand, suspect American hand, that how can both of them collaborate? But they have been known to play in tandem, even in a place like Pakistan. Both sides, and Pakistan is very good at, pleasing two
Masters,
whatever you want to call them, masters or whatever other term you want to use it. So they could have been the instrument, but there is more than I think America. Certainly, China has designs here, and all of it is linked not just to Bangladesh, but that whole nexus or the connect between Myanmar and what you are seeing today in Manipur and everything is. I don't think any of them are in isolation happening.
Ambassador, one final question to you before we have a quick chat on Israel. When I lived in Burma about 10 years ago, there was this, they were coming into a democracy, and, unfortunately, all of that has been reversed in the recent past. But the one thing that they were very cut up about, and this is, of course, people-to-people interaction, was the fact that India never really bothered to develop a relationship with them. And this seems to be sort of the case round the block, in the sense that we don't seem to have engaged, despite SAARC, to the extent that we needed to have engaged in our neighborhood. Prime Minister Modi, of course, made that change. He was the first to go to Myanmar, for example, in decades. And he went to Pakistan, as we know. Some criticize it, but I think it was an important outreach given the kind of mandate he got and the reputation he came with. I think it was important for him to do that to ensure stability between two nuclear nations. So he has made that effort. But 10 years again is very short to kind of build and plant relationships that will blossom. This is something that people do over decades and generations, isn't it, in international diplomacy and foreign policy?
Well, Advaita, you're right that India has been trying, and there have been a lot of complaints from our neighboring countries. But please tell me, which big country in the world has the friendliest relations with its neighbors? America doesn't. Nor do countries like China. China has disputes with 14 countries. It has border disputes with 14 countries. I know it for a fact that almost every Central Asian country has had to cede a large amount of land to settle, to buy peace with China. And relations are still not the best. So India has had a prickly relationship with some of its neighbors, including China, Pakistan, and now Bangladesh. And it has had a relationship of complaints from smaller neighbors. But at the same time, India's relationship with these neighbors, with one or two exceptions, has been one of generosity. It has not demanded anything in turn. Can you give me even a single example where a country has ceded land, and I don't mean just China, has ceded land to many of its neighbors? Bangladesh is one prime example where we gave away villages. Besides villages, we've given away 500,000 square kilometers of our sea rights. We've given away land to Sri Lanka, Kachativu Island, for example. So, complaints are natural in terms of, even among siblings. The older sibling has constant complaints from the younger one. So that translates into a bigger picture of countries. India is big, and India, quite frankly, cannot accede to every little demand and every little cringe from its neighbors. It's just not possible.
But how much of this do you think, in college we used to play a game called War, where we would, it was a board game and we would spend hours on it. But it's almost feeling like that is happening right now. And I'm not trying to be, doom seeker by suggesting that we're heading towards World War III, although I think we are. But this sort of instability that is being introduced in, countries, even if it's keeping neighborhoods unstable, like we're seeing happening with us, or direct conflict or civil war, wherein eventually, there will be a situation where countries will have to choose sides. How much of a reality do you think this is, or is this just me watching too much or reading too much into the situation as it is right now?
No, you're not reading too much. In fact, you're right to be reading in this direction. And I'm not just saying this because you're the daughter of a very close friend of mine. But
oh no, I thought that was supposed to not come out in public, because people are supposed to think that we're so classy now that we have ambassadors. Oh, busted.
So anyway.
Oh
So
no,
I
but I may as well call you uncle.
take back that part. Please edit it out. No, Advaita, quite seriously, this is the theme of my earlier book, the one previous to Autocrats. It's called Wartime. And I have gamed it in terms of all the big powers of the world today, and where their actions and where their strategies and tactics are leading to. I have no doubt that the world is sliding towards a situation where we will either have a World War III or have a major war affecting many regions of the world. And I don't count what is happening in Ukraine and Israel at the moment as anything which is approaching towards that situation. But there may be other situations where we would be affected. And in that case, I think we would be very close to that major war.
I understood. Okay, jumping back to Israel, I mean, being a film person, I know that a film festival was cancelled recently when it comes to the Israeli Film Festival, which I don't see why we would do that. But anyway, that has happened. Ambassador, your quick take on Israel, and then we'll of course let you go. This has gone on for too long.
Well, 7th October was horrible by any measure. Hamas had either lost its mind or it was vengeance of the most horrible kind for the restrictions that Israel puts on Hamas and so on. But killing, and in such a brutal manner, men, children, women, old, young, and almost like infants, shocked the entire world. Israel had a right to go after those people who were involved in that killing. But Israel then overdid that. And killing 50,000 or close to 50,000 people in Gaza is not retribution.
Yes.
It is also violence of a mindless kind. That is why I say that it is the minds of leaders which are leading us to this kind of a ruin. And that is, I'm sorry to advertise my book, that is what Autocrats is about.
Correct.
That why do such leaders with such devious mind or such deviant mind get elected and get to the top of a country where they lead country in a very undesirable direction. So a lot of blame goes to the Prime Minister of Israel because he's persisting despite protests from within Israel, despite wise counsels from around the world saying that please put a stop to it. There is also a blame to be shared by America because despite its noises, the fact is that it is supplying arms and it is taking vocally the side of Israel in the continuation of that violence. So it can stop if Mr. Netanyahu is willing to look at the other side of the picture, that is the misery that small children in Gaza are going through, misery that families are going through every other day in terms of destroyed houses and in terms of, trying their best to make do in open shelter. So Israel had suffered a terrible shock on 7th October, but this is no way of providing balm to the families of those who were affected.
Okay. Point noted. I think yeah, it is now exceedingly hard to even remain sort of balanced in terms of this because just seeing the devastation that is being caused. But Professor, if you are Israel and you live in that neighborhood, thank you, Ambassador. We'll let you go. If you are Israel and you live in that neighborhood, do you really have any other option? Because at some point, Hamas is going to come back again, and there'll always be attempts to do an October 7th like thing. It's not like if Israel stopped now, they would go into peaceful mode. This is the problem.
That is the
Yeah.
Israel has carried this out in Gaza. It did not carry this out in West, because at the end of the day, the PLO, which still rules West Bank, is clever enough to understand where is Israel's breaking point. You cannot kill 3,000 people in Israel and expect, the retribution to be of a normal kind. What Israel wants to do is to smash Hamas altogether. It is doing so in a population where more than half are sympathetic to Hamas and appears to still support Hamas. Now, it could be a toxic relationship where Hamas is so dictatorial that, not being a democracy, people cannot tell Hamas, look, for you, we are into this particular position. You do that, Hamas kills you. Then the only way is to ensure that you basically drain the swamp, and when you drain the swamp, in this case, you basically totally reorganize, and reorganize in a sense, destroy the infrastructure of Gaza to begin with. So what they want to do is to establish complete control. And let's face this. It is true that the Russians have, at least as a gesture to convention, criticized Israel. The Chinese have the Chinese broken trade relations with Israel? Any major power which in a sense is not supporting Israel is not withdrawing from Israel. And there is more criticism on Israel among certain academic bodies in Western universities than from even China and Russia, because the Chinese and the Russians know what they would have done had they been faced with a similar attack. And therefore, to expect Israel, which always faces an existential crisis, to a higher standard is absolutely hypocritical. What do you think the Iranians would have done if somebody had done the same thing to Iran? So, to expect Israel, to do a retaliatory raid and hold back is foolish, because Israel knows that will give Hamas the edge and say, look, here basically what is the perception is everything, that we can do this and get away with it. Okay, we killed 3,000, they killed 7,000. So what? We are still around. Unless you have this kind of a retribution, I'm very sorry to say that, things will not work. Having said that, let us face it. I'm old enough to know that this Hamas organization also came up because Israel played games vis-a-vis PLO. They tried to marginalize PLO. They put up Hamas. They created this particular Frankenstein. And while I, for the want of a better word, support Israel on this particular issue, I'm also mindful of the fact that they helped to create this particular Frankenstein.
I think we should now move on to more, interesting topics. Pallavi should give us her views about this whole controversy about Miss India, whether we should, about the tribal representation. Pallavi, you are best placed. Do you think Bengalis are getting enough representation?
Do you know Pallavi also went for Miss India? Pallavi was also...
What nonsense. I never did. Adwaita has gone for it.
That is why Pallavi...
And even Abhijit has gone for it. And Professor tried, but they chucked him out. But Abhijit went and he confused people.
Professor went as a judge. He was trying to get in as a judge.
That's your dream job, Sandeep.
They would have said
That's your dream job. And it's still not happening. Even though you bring it up in Sunday Club, it's still not happening.
I tell you, nothing happens for me on Sunday Club. Pallavi, what are your views on these issues? This is an important issue of national importance.
Frankly speaking, I think he's stretching it a bit too far. Caste census, I understand his politics on it. I mean, that's his politics. OBCs, Dalits, all that is okay. But yeah, private function hai. Miss India. Why should a Miss India have to be a Dalit or an OBC? I mean, and someone was responding to my tweet by saying you don't have people from small towns becoming an actor. That's not true. Increasingly, someone tweeted. I mean, Adwaita knows this better. Things are changing. It's no longer the big Khan name.
Chopra from?
People from... No. There are many others. There are so many. I mean, Vicky Kaushal ka father is
Bachchan is from a small town.
Allahabad is not from a small town.
Sherwood boy, and then Allahabad.
No, Abhi ke actors, yeah. Look at the actors on OTT. Many of them who are in Rajkumar Rao and all these people, they're not exactly Khan family, na? They're smaller towns. And I don't think any actor will not be taken because that person belongs to the SC or the Dalit community. Or I don't think an actor will be taken over because, hey, we want to give more representation to Dalits. You have to be a good actor.
I'm waiting for Simi Garewal's reaction to my tweet.
Did you tag her?
I'm waiting for Simi Garewal's response to my tweet.
That's more your age demographic. Yes.
But did you tag her? Have you tagged her?
True, but why did she agree to act in the role of a tribal girl in Satyajit Ray movie? She should have told Satyajit Ray that this is not on. I'm not going to do that. And she's such a great fan of the Gandhi family. He should have insisted that she doesn't get that role and somebody, a real tribal girl, gets that role.
You're really
invested
in this topic. I'm impressed.
No, but my point is that this is a little bizarre, I mean, a Miss India chosen on the basis because because you're a Dalit or OBC, are a private function hai yaar. Anyone wants to apply, go and apply. No one is going to stop you or say no to you, or because you're an OBC or a Dalit. And I'm not going to be made Miss India.
So I think
Pallavi,
basically I
this
was
is not
actually
bizarre. Advaita,
Are you
this is
go-
not bizarre at all. I'll tell you why.
ज़्यादा हो गया.
You see, no, already a lot of people have been talking about private reservations in the private sector as well. The fact is, you want to play up caste, then you keep on hammering at it all the time, including this. Now, see, one thing, one could do a survey. You could go to OBC girls and SC/ST girls and actually ask them, यहाँ पे reservations होना चाहिए कि नहीं? And I'm sure the answer they will get basically will shock or disappoint Rahul Gandhi. That's not the question. The question is the following. He believes this is a card that he has, which in a sense can power him to victory. And he's going to play it everywhere, every form. It does not matter what it does to society. Okay. He will play every divisive card. In some places, he will have traction. In some places, he won't have traction. But he will not stop playing anything that he believes can basically affect the BJP edifice. So therefore, I'm afraid this is something that you have to live with. And there will be consequences to this for the nation.
No, that is what, Professor, I'm coming in. Though I might have sounded facetious in the beginning, but this is not at all an innocuous statement. And for people like us to dismiss it, or even for the political parties to dismiss it as a stray statement or something somebody doesn't understand is not correct. So there is a much, much more deeper, and that is what people have been saying for a long time. And that is something has to be called out, because our so-called custodians of, morality and democracy and liberal values, they tend to look the other side while they know exactly what is happening. And we are today moving in a very, very dangerous direction. And I'm sorry to say this, sometimes our government is also acting in a very defensive way. I don't expect them to have a separate tribal, beauty contest or something like that, but they are reacting to these castes and other provocations. And I think it's time for people, right-thinking people, to be speaking about it. I was very happy that day in a show with on another channel where someone like Gusharan Das was so vocal about these issues. That was more in the lateral entry question. You cannot be taking this everywhere. And that is where I think the right-thinking people will have to call it out, because there are a lot of people how many understand who organizes, that is Times of India and Filmfare and Femina, who organizes these Miss India contests. Some people will think, वो मोदी जी करते हैं, लेकिन मोदी जी क्यों इनको नहीं बुलाते हैं? These are the kind of misinformation that is being very consciously fed in.
And you're right.
That's not fair at all.
Yeah, and I think you're right. It is a kind of strategic statement, especially in a country which has such issues with skin tone and all of those kind of things, to kind of allege that because you may look a certain way, there's no space for you, even when it comes to something like the aesthetic. So I think, and that is something that the ordinary person can connect with very quickly. That we're not even part of the aesthetic of the country in that sense. So this is dangerous stuff. But on the other hand, it's also crying wolf so many times, and I think someone needs to tell him that story again, that diminishes the whole.
You shouldn't actually let him cry wolf, because that basically erodes his credibility. I think this is one place where he has been foolish, but that does not again contradict the proposition that what he's been doing is dangerous and divisive.
Pallavi, any comments, or do you just like to come on the Sunday Club and be on your phone texting?
Oh, sorry. I missed this question.
We're talking about your favorite. How can you miss it?
Rahul
Gandhi and Miss India.
I told you, I think this comment was a bit too much. It was stretching it a bit too far. But I think he's very clear in his head, and I'm not going to say that it's wrong, because everyone is entitled to do their politics. But he's very clear-cut about the fact that caste census is going to be the big thing, and backwards OBCs. That's going to be the messiah. I'm going to be their kind of guardian angel and all of that stuff. But you draw a line somewhere, na? Kal to kuch zyada hi ho gaya na in Prayagraj.
And also, I think he had a moment also, na, when Deepika Padukone, Kareena Kapoor, no, not Kareena, was it Kareena? One of them, or both of them, was sort of saying he's so good looking and things like that, right? So
Yeah. And none of
maybe
them
he's
are the list
just
of
So
okay.
OBCs, by the way.
Pallavi has been saying for ages, yeah. So that's a different. Pallavi's
But
case
I'm not,
is one of
I'm not Kareena or Deepika
huge
Padukone.
unrequited.
Katrina never said it.
Look at her.
Sandeep, I take that as a. I take that as a
Pallavi
little
was
bit of a
like,
compliment.
Pallavi was part of that clique.
Close
Back
to
in
it,
the-
huh? Look, she's
I used to
blushing.
be
She's
called-
frozen.
No, I'm not blushing. See, one part calls me Piddi, the other part calls me Bhakt. So
Are you seeing how she's balancing again?
Yeah.
I'm
balancing.
not.
Yeah.
That's what people
I'm
say.
not-
Post June 4th, couple of people have been doing a lot of balancing acts.
No, not me.
And
I
Miss
know who you're
Ghosh is
talking
one of
about.
them.
Liz Ghosh has been doing a great job on that, we must say. You should be actually part of Prime Minister's team, rather than inducting all kinds of people into that.
No. That has been put on hold. Sandeep, by the way, that's the
But
thing.
that's why I'm saying good. It's been put on hold. Now you should get in there.
Yeah.
You're a deserving
Yes.
candidate.
Right?
Thank you, Professor. I wish you people could have your way, but that's not happening.
Yeah, we'd like women to be appointed.
I
to
also
these
want to go into a lateral entry, but that has been stopped now.
I'm not qualified enough to go into any lateral entry, so I can't even
Me neither.
have that aspiration. No, you're
Me
like a
neither.
master's in journalism and all that. So you
How
have an
am I master's?
expertise. What am I? I'm just a writer.
Oh, now she's fishing for compliments. Please tell her, Professor, that she's a rock star.
You're a graduate, right?
हाँ. बड़ी
How
बड़ी मुश्किल
deep,
से
Professor?
बड़ी मुश्किल से
ग्रेजुएशन मुश्किल से होती है, मास्टर्स आराम से हो जाता है.
मास्टर्स हमने नहीं मास्टर्स नहीं किया. I'm the only one in my family who's not done a master's. Imagine.
कोई बात नहीं, ग्रेजुएशन से हो जाता है.
Graduation से हो जाता है. Maybe I can apply to a University of Jammu for a master's, Professor.
अरे
Will you
इग्नू से
take
कर लो ना.
care of my
Ignore
I
attendance?
know,
कर लो.
Professor, you should
Ignore.
sponsor
Professor, you
our
can
visit to
find my
all of us.
attendance, no?
Now that there are
And
going to be
Ignu, she
elections in
can
Jammu and
get she
Kashmir,
can get a doctorate also, yeah.
yeah, we can have a lateral entry degree from University of Jammu. You can do that for us.
Yeah,
No.
that works.
Okay, I think we
Why
should
You are from JNU, for
sign off
heaven's sake.
today.
यार. अच्छा.
So what
Thank
if I'm
you.
from JNU? Okay, guys.
People are,
bye.
Let's sign off.
still watching. I don't understand why people still watch this part. But
I think they
thank you
like
for
us.
watching.
Sandeep,
Do
we
like,
hope to see you soon in Delhi.
Subscribe. Like, share, subscribe. And we're not going to let AIM come for our whatever social get together that we do because he stopped coming to Sunday Club and doesn't respond also.
Why doesn't he
Oh,
come
dear.
to Sunday Club?
I don't know.
Withhold that rice.
Yeah, withhold the rice. Yeah.
No, he's not getting the rice now. Correct.
Pallavi got rice from Dhaka for Obijit. Okay, everybody,
Yeah.
thank you for watching and we'll be back.
170 rupees per kg.